I get to do the next one with Jessica Shu of Affinity China. And I've actually known Affinity China from their start. So stay tuned.
I'm actually the replacement here, so.
Yeah. Well, you're the co-founder, though, right?
Yes, a co-founder I am.
Yeah, Christine Liu was not able to be here today. Her son is sick, and so sometimes life takes priorities, right? Over startups.
And
Yeah.
I'm ready for the unexpected questions right now, too.
Yeah, exactly. So how does it feel to be here, first of all?
It feels good.
Yeah.
A little bit nervous, if everyone can tell. I usually am not the one that makes the speeches, so.
Okay, we'll go easy then. So tell me, Affinity China's got this really interesting business model, and you've already learned a lot in a couple of years. And so tell how the business model has pivoted in just 2 years, right?
Well, we started off pretty early on, even more than 2 years, and it was really just relationship based.
Okay.
So just to kind of give everyone an idea, Affinity China is a luxury lifestyle provider for mainland Chinese when they travel overseas. That's the basic gist of it.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, we really started off with very high end, because we saw that there was a niche market for it. If you know anything about traveling in China, you see tour buses. You see the hats and flags everywhere you go. But when it came to something more high-end, you didn't see that. It wasn't available 5 years ago. And unfortunately, for most Chinese people, when they travel, they don't speak English. So there was a lot of cultural barriers out there.
Yeah.
So we started off doing a lot of high-end travel.
Okay.
And what we found is the
Like
more...
what? What was an example of something you did in the early days?
Let's go to the Hamptons and rent a $40 million estate and stay there for a week, which was by far very challenging for Chinese that are used to city lights, sirens, playing mahjong with their friends to completely no noise.
Yeah.
You're here in the woods. And what a lot of the times, what we found was when we traveled with these clients, because of course any high net worth Chinese needs a lot of hand holding. In China, there's so much service out there. Every restaurant you go to, there's 10 people serving you. When they go outside, there's one person, but they expect 10 people working through that one person.
So you didn't exactly have that in the Hamptons?
Oh, we did.
You did? Okay.
We even had a Chinese chef come out and actually cook for them as well.
Wow.
But they expect a lot.
Yeah.
And so it became, very difficult in the beginning. A lot of expectations that they had, and a lot of changes too. One time we were on a private jet, and the guest decided to change the landing location while we were on the jet, because he assumed it was 100% okay to do so. And so, of course, trying to explain that to him became very hard, and trying to actually ask the pilot if we could change it became even harder.
Yeah.
And
so how did all this influence your thinking about your business model then?
So that's what we found out. Many high net worth Chinese were very difficult to deal with. And it wasn't something that was very scalable. I think everyone has had that experience before. It wasn't very scalable. There were opportunities. Many Chinese like to do investments, and those were great opportunities, but it wasn't something that said, okay, next month they're going to invest in this real estate project, or next month they're going to look at this investment project. No. So especially with the government change, it became much harder to do the high-end stuff, or to really grow a business that is VC-backed and make it scalable. So we actually went and looked at the mass affluent, those that were what we call the nouveau riche, younger, more tech savvy as well. A lot of our high-end clients really, all they did was text messaging, and at most, if they read their email, I was surprised. So we went on the more mass market approach, and we partnered with a large financial institution, and we launched a mass market loyalty card for them.
Yeah. Was this a really challenging pivot, though? I mean, how did it happen? It sounds kind of like you made it easy, but I'm sure there was a lot of angst along the way.
There was a lot of, because it really, I mean, we're still doing the high-end portion. It's just when it comes, and it's more relationship building.
Okay.
when we decided to actually pivot more to the mass market, or mass affluent as we call it, there was a hesitation because a lot of our relationships were with the high end. And there was a whole different market approach too. And a lot of the brands, the partners that we were working with, they wanted to target the high end as well. They didn't want to target the mass affluent. So what we realized was we wanted to actually pinpoint something that was data backed. So we could go back to all our partners and say, hey, there's actually a huge market here, and we're able to actually aggregate it. And that was actually looking for a specific point. And what we realized was every single Chinese person that ever travels, there is one key thing that they will do no matter where they go.
What's that?
And that is shopping. Sometimes we've taken them where they've canceled the complete day. They said, I want to go shopping, and that's all I want to do. So we looked at it and said, well, we work with all the fashion brands out there. What can we do that would actually drive this market forward? And we said, why don't we give every single Chinese person a loyalty card?
This is really just following, getting the clues from your own customers, right?
Exactly. Why don't we give them a card, let them go shopping to all the stores that they're going to go to already, not actually have to take care of their travel needs, which is probably the nightmare part.
Yeah.
And let them buy things. And when they go in to buy things, they get the VIP perks, they get the discounts. And from the brands, we got a transaction fee from it.
So which major financial institution did you link up with?
American Express.
That's a pretty major. How did that happen?
As Rebecca knows, one of our seed capital VCs is RE Capital. And the two R's actually stand for Jim Robinson III and Jim Robinson IV. And Jim Robinson III was...
And when you call the company, they ask you, which Jim are you asking to speak with, the third or the fourth? And I always hesitate. Oh, gee, I'm not quite sure. I hadn't kept that close account, but yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
And I actually think Jim the third is much more in better shape than Jim the fourth.
Because Jim the fourth is working too hard.
Shh, we won't say anything. So what's interesting about it was, Jim the third was actually the chairman of Amex for 15 plus years in, I believe it was in the late 80s to
This is Jim
early
Robinson,
90s.
former Amex chairman.
Yes. And what's interesting about it was the Centurion card was actually started when he was chairman of American Express. So that's where the relationship came from. And when American Express actually came to China the first time around, I hope there's no one from American Express here, so I'm just going to say it. It didn't go so well, and they kind of stepped out and relooked at it. I mean, most of their China operations right now is actually run out of their Singapore office. There's actually no one physically here in American Express in China. And what people know is when you actually use American Express, it's extremely convenient. It's just there's no brand awareness here. And what we are doing essentially is creating the brand awareness and creating the aspect where people will see the use of it because they're utilizing with the co-branded card.
So you have an Affinity China Amex card then?
Yes.
Okay. And is that any different from any other affiliated branded credit card?
Well, first of all, it's not a credit card yet. There's a lot of processes that need to go through to make it a credit card, and you actually need a lot of information from the client themselves. At the moment, it is a prepaid card, or even simpler, it's just a loyalty card.
Can anyone here get one?
We'll talk about that later. There are qualifications to it, but in the initial stages, yes, anyone can get it. What it combines is Amex's superb concierge and utilization of their easy to swipe anywhere you go, some places where UnionPay is not even accepted, and our connections with all the brand partners that we work with.
So talk a little bit about the venture capital financing for Affinity China. You managed to get RRE Ventures, a major RRE Ventures is one of the Forbes top VCs. They're on the Midas list. In fact, Jim Robinson is on the Midas list. How were you able to get the attention of Jim Robinson as an investor? And you also have some interesting Chinese investors as well. So how did all this come about?
I think that's probably a good question for Christine. So Christine actually was probably the first person that got to know Jim, and I believe that's through her startup background and her multiple connections in Asia. And actually, Jim the Fourth, picked notice of this through Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah,
So social media does work.
Christine is an active Twitterer, and I think she got Jim Robinson on Twitter. She got me on Twitter as well.
Exactly. And what's interesting about it was she was talking about how there was a big market, and there was a niche market that actually catered to the high net worth Chinese, but there wasn't actually a platform out there that supported it. And that actually reminded Jim of Amex back in the days, because what Amex did was the same thing that we're doing for China as they did for the New Yorkers back in the 60s and 70s. So it made a lot of sense to him. And at that time, he was very much interested in tapping the China market and understanding from a client basis, how does China work and how does the individual actually think? So our seed round actually came from China, but our follow-on seed round actually came from angels inside, oh, sorry. I think I messed that up a little bit.
You have Dave McClure as an investor too, right?
Yes.
From 500 Startups.
Correct. I believe there are some 500 China.
Yeah, I think that the lady who runs 500 Startups is here.
Probably later.
Yeah, but yeah, so you had all these brand name investors.
Correct. And we also had a lot of Chinese that came on as a follow-on round. As Alvin was saying, Chinese are very interesting to deal with as angel investors. Most of our angel Chinese investors ask for the perks. They want to meet famous people all the time.
So that's why they want to invest?
Correct.
Okay. Is
Actually,
there any other major difference between the Chinese investors and the Western investors?
I think there is a major difference. For a lot of the Western investors, they're VCs, they're institutions. They look at it as a strategic investment. You go through a due diligence process with them. They make sure that they mentor you as well. For the Chinese investor, usually I get asked 3 questions. What do you guys do? How much money do you need? And how much money can you make me? And that's about it. So there's definitely the reason why they invest is very different.
So tell a little bit about who your China investors are.
I'm probably not allowed to say too much about that, but they are definitely entrepreneurs themselves.
And how did you meet them?
Actually, they were recommended, and they came with us to travel with us on some of our adventures out there, and they actually liked what we were doing and wanted to invest.
That's a good way.
So
what about your own background? You were a former banker, right?
Correct.
And an analyst?
Correct.
So
I was.
Yeah, go ahead.
My backing is actually investment banking and private equity. Probably some of you guys here are in that same field. But I actually grew up in China, and most of my life I spent in China. Thankfully, I actually went to Berkeley and learned about the startup community there and all the VC community. But I think what's actually strong about it is a lot of startups, you have people with great ideas, right? The passionate people. And then you have the lower round, which is the execution people. And so what banking and I guess being in the finance industry has taught me is being very detail oriented and looking and making sure that it's realistic to do. I don't think I'm the creative person. I don't think about the big ideas, but I try to connect A to B.
Okay, well, that's very key. So what do you see as the future for Affinity China? Is it really continuing to go after this mass affluent market and getting MX into China, or?
It is definitely going on that route. There is a big opportunity for the mass affluent market and taking on their trends. What's very interesting to us is actually the data that goes behind all of this, their shopping habits. Because what we are able to do is actually go back to the brands and say, well, I have a person that actually goes into your store in 10 different locations. But unfortunately, he's not a VIP to you because he only spends $10,000 in each of these stores. But on an aggregate level, he spends $100,000 on your brand. You don't know that he's a client of yours, but we do. So it's the data that actually excites us a lot.
So you're into big data then too?
Yes. Quote unquote big data, yes.
So what do you like about what you do? What attracted you to Affinity China? What do you like about it?
I feel the basis of why I joined or why I co-founded Affinity China was what I saw in bridging a gap between the cultures of China and the West. Secretly, all I wanted to do is make Chinese people look better in front of Westerners. Unfortunately, these days it hasn't been the greatest. But there's a part of me that wants to see Chinese when they are with Upper East Siders in New York. They look the same, they act the same, they look like they're New Yorkers, but they're from China. And at this point, we're just not at the stage. But that is the reason and what drives me to keep doing what I do in Affinity China. Is one day, hopefully, we can bridge it and create a real platform that Chinese. Affluent Chinese can talk to affluent Westerners and be on the same level.
Okay, that sounds very good. Well, thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.